In this episode, I'm sharing a personal story and what life offered me as a beautiful reflection on perspective and forgiveness. Hello, and welcome to the Beautiful Reflections podcast. I'm your host, Katherine Johnson, a certified professional coach, mentor, writer, and speaker. I help professional women gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to pursue their bigger purpose and vision, so that they can have fulfillment and thrive in their careers. I believe there is beauty in our voices, beauty in our stories, and beauty in our journeys. There is power in community, connection, and deep, meaningful conversation, which is why me and my guests are here to share our stories, experiences, lessons, and learning to inspire you as you walk the path and step into your next level. We go deep, sharing beautiful reflections of what this personal growth journey looks like in real, living color. This journey of pursuing our purpose and vision as we continue to evolve. It is my mission to empower you to believe in your power, to embrace your own uniqueness, and to be the best version of you. I want to see you thrive purposefully. Now on to the episode for today. Hello, and welcome to the Beautiful Reflections podcast. It's me, your host, Katherine Johnson. Today, I'm sharing a very personal story and the beautiful reflection that life offered me through this experience. As you know by now, this podcast is all about, as the name says, beautiful reflections. But I wanted to take a minute to explain what that actually means. I've come to know that life is always offering something for us to see, what I call the LOL, which means lesson, opportunity, or learning, but only if we're open. When we're open, we see that it's all a beautiful reflection. It's something beautiful for us to see that will help us as we continue to grow and evolve on this journey called life. Now, this belief has really served me greatly. In fact, I believe it's why I am where I am today. Despite having many challenges in my life, things that I've had to overcome, despite the healing that still continues, and despite what I'm still learning and uncovering about myself each day, through this perspective, I'm still able to have inner peace, joy, and fulfillment because of the beautiful reflection that I choose to see and what I choose to believe about it all. I believe that there is greater purpose and meaning in everything, and reflection offers us an opportunity to uncover the LOL. Now, throughout the podcast episodes to come, I'll be sharing my beautiful reflections, the things that I needed to see, my LOLs, and what it has yielded on my personal growth journey, all in hopes that my stories and experiences will cause you to reflect on your own, so that you too can continue to grow and evolve on your journey. Today, I'm sharing a very personal story about my biological father. This experience offered a beautiful reflection on perspective and forgiveness. So as you listen, reflect on your own perspective. What are the stories that you've made up or the perspective that you have chosen to take? And reflect on forgiveness. What forgiveness means to you, and ultimately, what life could be offering you as a beautiful reflection about perspective and forgiveness. So I didn't meet my biological father until I was in my early 20s. I actually learned accidentally that the man I called dad, who had been there since as far back as I could remember, was not my biological father. My aunt said to me one day that she didn't know where I got my height from because my real dad, Mark, was short. It was years later when my mom finally told me that I had a different father. She said that for whatever reason, he didn't want to be a part of my life. She had taken me around him and his family when I was a baby, and she wasn't received or welcomed warmly, so she stopped trying, and she never went back. As a young girl, I remember thinking about him so much. I remember looking up his name in the phone book, checking to see if he lived nearby. I wondered what he looked like and if I resembled him. I wondered if he lived in the same city. I wondered if he had other children. But most of all, I found myself wondering why. Why didn't he want to be a part of my life? Because I didn't have any of these answers, I made up a lot of stories. And these stories ultimately led me to conclude that there was something wrong with me, and I was the reason why he didn't want to be a part of my life. As a result, I ended up having mixed feelings about him, and this confusion led me to ultimately become angry because I wanted answers that I didn't have, and I wanted to know why. Even though my dad, Milton, the man who raised me since I was a baby and has always considered and treated me as his very own, had been there for most of my life. Although he was very strict raising me and my siblings, I'm beyond grateful and truly blessed to have what I call a father. His love and support has meant everything and still means everything to me. But when I met Mark for the first time, I was less than enthused. At this point, I told myself that I was no longer a little girl, and I didn't need him. I had a father, and what could he say at this point? Now, how that meeting even came about is another interesting story. A close friend of my aunt's was out, and she saw him and told him about me. She gave him my mom's number. Him and my mom spoke, and then my mom later spoke to me saying how he really wanted to meet me. So my mom encouraged me to talk to him. Again, I'm in my 20s at the time, and I'm like, for what? And what further irritated me was my mother's persistence that I caught him. I was like, no, give him my phone number and tell him if he wants to meet me, then he needs to call me. I remember thinking, I've been here all along. You're the one who's been AWOL. So the first meeting was just awkward, to say the least. He picked me up and took me to see his family members home. I think we went to his mom's house, and he introduced me to everyone. But what I found interesting was that no one was surprised or shocked. Everyone was like, oh, hey. So apparently, everyone knew that he had another daughter, me. So it wasn't a surprise to them. It turns out I'm the oldest of his 6 children. He told me about his other children, their names, their ages, and he showed me some pictures. And I even got to meet one of my half-sisters. I remember just being quiet and smiling and taking it all in. Also, I was really waiting for an explanation from him about why he was absent, what happened, or maybe even an apology. That never came. The only statement he made was something to the effect of, I shouldn't be mad at him or my mom for decisions that they made when they were young. During that visit, he gave me a gold necklace with a cross charm. And as a kid, I loved gold. I loved necklaces, bracelets, and charms. He said it meant a lot to him. Now, you would think I would be happy about the gift, but it actually made me more angry. I remember thinking, this cross doesn't make up for you not being there. Is this all you have to give me 20 plus years later? It sat in my jewelry box for a long time, and I eventually gave it away. After the first meeting, we didn't keep in touch. There was no further family reunions. He didn't attempt to call me or anything. And I was really surprised by this because I thought he would want to try and have a relationship with me, especially after meeting me. I did reach out to him occasionally for holidays and birthdays, trying to keep in touch, but I felt like it was one-sided. And I'm like, it shouldn't be that way. So I stopped trying to make an effort. Also, I still had a lot of unanswered questions. We ended up talking another time, and he was telling me about my half-siblings. I was somewhat interested in learning about them because I was still debating if I would try to have a relationship with them at this point. Remember, I'm in my mid-20s. I remember taking out a piece of paper and writing down their names and the information as he told me. When he finished, I looked at my list and realized the numbers weren't adding up. He told me he had 6 kids, and I only had 5 on my list, including myself. So I told him, what about the last one? You said you had 6. So he recounts them again, adding another younger son that lived with his mother in another state. And I remember thinking, how could you forget about your kid? But it was that conversation that allowed me to begin to make peace with the situation. Because I started to wonder about his father. What was his upbringing like? What were his thoughts on fatherhood and what a father should be? And I concluded that I had no answers for those things, and I could no longer conclude that his absence had anything to do with me. Heck, it seemed like he was having trouble remembering all of his children during that conversation. So I had to start to let it go because it was only causing me anger and frustration. I remember sharing my feelings about him with my therapist and my close friends, and I also spent a lot of time writing about how I felt. I wrote letters to him that I didn't send, but all of this really allowed me to begin the healing process and make peace with the situation. The anger was only hardening my heart, and I didn't want to be angry and bitter over circumstances that were really beyond my control. The simple truth was that I was going to have to be okay with not understanding because the answers I was seeking may never come. So with this newfound perspective, and as a part of my healing journey, I invited him out to lunch while I was visiting Rochester, New York. My sole purpose was to let him know that I wasn't harboring any ill feelings towards him, and I didn't think harshly of him, and I wasn't mad at him or anything like that. I had the opportunity to tell him this, and we actually talked, and I learned more about him. He actually talked a lot about himself. But again, there was no apology or no further explanation, and this time, I was okay with that. This experience taught me a lot. I learned some lessons that have been instrumental to my growth. The first thing I learned was that I couldn't hold on to these stories that I had made up. I had to let go of everything I told myself about his reasons for not being there. I had to accept that it wasn't about me. There was nothing wrong with me. It was a decision that he made and continues to make for whatever reason. The second thing it taught me was that I really had to release the anger that I was harboring so that I could heal the hurt that I felt inside. This circumstance was again completely outside of my control. There was nothing I could do to change it or make it be anything different than what it was. So I could only look for what life was offering me through this experience. The last thing I learned was that I had to count my blessings. I did have a father who was there and loves me like his very own. He's been one of my biggest fans, and I couldn't imagine my life without him. I am beyond grateful to have him, his love, and his support, and to have him as my number one dad. The beautiful reflection in all of this is that in life, there will be many things that we may not understand. They may hurt us and cause us to feel a slew of emotions as a result. But the choice to harbor those feelings is ours. It's all in the perspective that we choose to take, the thoughts that we choose to have about the situation. In choosing to let go and to release it, I chose peace. I chose to have love and compassion for what I didn't know and may never know. I chose to heal for continued growth. This is what life offered me as a beautiful reflection. Now, I hope that you're reflecting on your own circumstances and experiences. I think without reflection, we never get the LOL, lesson, opportunity, and learning. And then we end up stuck, finding ourselves in repeat situations, not having what we want, unfulfilled, and harboring anger and resentment. When these things take root, they branch into every other part of our life. And it shows up in how we're being, the life that we're living or not living, and our experiences. The power is in the perspective that we choose to take about it. Our choice to release, to let go, and to heal from the things that will only limit our potential. Our choice to choose what supports our growth and our highest self. Our choice to forgive. Forgiveness is always first and foremost for you, so that your life is not bound by the decisions of others, so that you can move forward without the weight of anger, bitterness, and sometimes even hate in your heart. Those negative emotions ultimately affect you and your life, while in many cases the other person remains oblivious, moves on with their life, or appears unaffected. Now, I challenge you to spend some time in self-reflection and ask yourself, what's the story that you've made up? How is it making you feel? How is your perspective supporting or hindering your growth? What new perspective could you choose? And who do you need to forgive, even if it's yourself? I guarantee that there is greater peace, joy, and fulfillment available to you through your willingness to be open to see what life may be offering you as a beautiful reflection. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate your continued support. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a few minutes and leave a rating and a review. Also, spread the love by sharing the podcast with someone you know. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn at Katherine N Johnson. Also, use the hashtags Katherine N Johnson and Beautiful Reflections Podcast on Instagram and share how the podcast is supporting your journey. Until next time.